Amin. Amin. Lego Amin. Well, we're in a series called Missed It by That Much, and the title comes from the 60s TV sitcom titled Get Smart. It was Agent 86, Maxwell Smart, who could always be heard to say the words, "Missed it by that much." We got to crank it up and hear it again. I'd like to hear Maxwell. Can you give it a little more juice? Do it one more time, Mary.
Missed it by that much.
This is a series of messages that teaches us that little things matter. And I hope that we gain understanding and we reduce the margin for error as we serve our Lord Jesus Christ today. My hope is that each one of us will walk closer with God when we leave this place than when we came in the door. Closer to the Lord. Now, today's talk is titled Esau's Empty Etiquette. Esau's Empty Etiquette. Last week, we talked about another individual who was very far away from the Lord, it seems. Saul's sad sacrifice. But today, Esau's empty etiquette. Now, growing up, the Howard boys didn't have much couth. There were 5 Howard boys in one household, and we just really, sometimes you wouldn't think we had any home training. Mom tried to teach us etiquette. I'll never forget one summer, Mom decided, I don't know what possessed her to do this, but she decided that she was going to give training to her kids how to enjoy a formal meal. And so this is what she did every Wednesday night for the entire summer. Before we went to church, we always had a formal meal. And when I say formal meal, I mean cloth napkins. I'm talking about a glass for the water and a glass for the tea. 2 glasses in one meal. 2 forks. One of them was a dinner fork and one was a salad fork. And Mom taught us, boys, take your spoon and push away with a soup bowl and then bring it to your mouth. Try not to slurp and shovel it in. And then she told us, when you end the meal, fold your napkin and put it aside and ask, "May I be excused?" And there were all kinds of things that Mom taught us during that stretch. She taught us that we needed to say please. She taught us that we needed to say thank you. And she had ways of enforcing that. And I'm so sad to disappoint Mom. I never made it to a steak dinner, not yet. And I didn't say steak dinner, I said a steak dinner. Maybe someday I will. But if I ever do, at least I'll know how to have proper table etiquette. Thanks to Mom. And now your little sweet pastor's wife, Stephanie, you might think she's just such a sweetie, but I've seen this other side of her. And I'm going to tell you, one time when the boys were little, we came to the dinner table, and Stephanie was the best. She always had these little games she would play to teach our boys proper manners. So we come to the dinner table, and there on the table in front of each plate was a little pile of M&Ms. She didn't say a thing about it. The boys, of course, wanted to reach for one right away. No, that's for after the meal. Okay. And then we just started eating. And if somebody didn't say please, Stephanie would just reach out and take one of the M&Ms away. If someone forgot to say thank you, she would just reach over, take one of the M&Ms away. And this went on, and finally we figured out, here's what's going on. She is reinforcing these manners. And some of the penalties required more than one M&M, maybe a couple of them. And when you've got 2 boys, I can just let your imagination go on that, what might cause a little more of an infraction. I don't think I had any M&Ms left by the end of the meal. But she reinforced to us proper etiquette. Well, we're talking about a guy, Esau, who really could have used some better etiquette. And we're going to read about him in Genesis chapter 27, and I ask you to follow along with me. After Isaac finished blessing him, and catch this, Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence. His brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. And then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came. And I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry, and he said to his father, "Bless me! Me too, Father." But he said, "Your brother has come deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob?" By the way, Jacob means sort of like horse thief, someone who's always pulling pranks. "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he's taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." And then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." And then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother." It's a way of saying you'll live by the sword, you're going to have to defend yourself. And you will serve your brother. Now he was firstborn, but now he's the servant to his technically younger brother. But, when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Well, first thing you need to know is that I misspelled the word etiquette. I was preparing this sermon and I spelled etiquette, E-D-I-C-A-T-E, etiquette. And I happened to think, I had the good sense to realize that red underline, that means misspelled, okay. And I searched online, I typed in etiquette the way I spelled it, and this is what it brought up. The only one that had it was the Urban Dictionary, which is sort of slang way, and it says this: etiquette, E-D-I-C-A-T, is when you're not educated enough to spell etiquette. That's me. Mother would be so proud. Wouldn't Sharon Seelheimer be proud? You know, she's sort of editor around here at the church. And don't tell her when she gets back. Esau lacked etiquette. Esau had a certain emptiness that surrounded his meal times. And actually, maybe you've picked up on this already, we're not really talking about his table manners. We're talking about something that happened at mealtime, and it happened several times in his life, and it pulled him away from where he should have been with the Lord. Now, Jacob, his brother, Jacob cheated, and his mom helped him in it. I mean, they didn't go hunting. She comes up with this scheme. What they did, they only prepared a meal from the livestock that they already had. And then she puts fake clothes and sheepskin on his arms and takes the clothing actually of his brother so that Isaac, who's in the deathbed, will smell it and he'll think that it's Esau. And so they cheated. Now, granted, it wasn't exactly like driving through the fast food and saying, "I'll take one rack of lamb, please." They didn't do that. And it took a lot of work. They still had to butcher the animal and prepare the meal. But compared to going out and hunting and then bringing that animal home and then preparing it, they were cheaters. Ever thought about how Esau missed it by that much?
Missed it by that much.
He missed it just by that much. You know what? Esau comes in, and I mean, you know, Jacob, he's got the help of his mother, but Esau, he also had success that day. Esau apparently actually went out and hunted. Now, we're not sure. It's a little bit sketchy, but it appears that Esau went out and hunted the animal and brought it back and butchered it and got it ready, and he comes in to feed his dying father so that he can get the deathbed blessing. And Dad says, "Wait a minute, I already blessed somebody. Your brother connived, he tricked, he pulled the fast one over." And the words that are just glaring to me, "I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him." And indeed, he will be blessed. Esau had a successful hunt that day, we think, or did he? We don't know. Maybe Esau did just like Jacob. Maybe Esau goes out and finds an animal from the livestock and he brings it in, part of their own cattle, and he cheats, and maybe he thinks to himself, "Well, Dad is dying anyway. He doesn't see that well. He won't know the difference. I'll just take one of our own animals." But we don't know quite for sure, because the text does say that he came in from a hunt. And so it's just really interesting. Maybe he had a successful hunt, but he just didn't get there in time. Either way, he missed it by
that much.
Now, this morning I want to share a couple of different concepts with you. I want you to consider two different concepts. First one is this: the concept of consequences. Everybody say consequences.
Consequences.
Don't you just hate that word? That's a very powerful word. There are consequences. Now think about this guy Esau. He despised his father's birthright to him. I mentioned earlier that Esau displayed emptiness in his lack of etiquette. Earlier in his life, he despised his birthright, and it involved a meal too. He came in, get this, he came in from an unsuccessful hunting trip. Irony, right? And he smells the red stew that his brother is cooking, and he says, "I'm famished. I'm dying. I'm starving to death. Come on, give me some of that red stew." And in fact, Esau, his name means red. And Edom, the nation that he would become, means red. And this is red stew. Maybe he's a red-haired, red-bearded guy that loves red stew. I don't know. But Esau, he comes in saying, "I'm hungry. Give me some of this food." Jacob never misses a trick. And he says, "I'll give you some stew, all right. Yeah, you bet you can have a bowl of these red beans. But first, promise me that you will give me your right of being the firstborn." Just how hungry are you, Esau? You can have some red stew if you give up your right as the firstborn. And Esau says, "What's good? What good is it going to do me to be firstborn if I die of starvation?" Yeah, you can have the right. Now give me the soup. Esau should have eaten at my mama's table. Esau should have sat down at Stephanie's table and learned a little bit better about etiquette. I mean, I think if he would have lost his pile of M&Ms, he would have learned a few things about etiquette. But he just flippantly threw away his birthright. No big deal. Yeah, whatever. I was born a few minutes before my twin. So what? You're always on me about this. You're always bugging me about this. Okay, who cares? You were born first. What does it really matter? You can have the birthright. So this attitude affected his birthright. But now, you fast forward many years and his dad is dying, and now it's affecting his deathbed blessing as well. As his father was lying in the deathbed, he said, it's me, Father, your firstborn. But he had already rejected his right as the firstborn. He's already changed his status. He has despised his birthright, and now he's face to face with the consequences of his actions. Consequences. Not too long ago, I had a student in a classroom, and she was begging me not to leave the note that I had written for her permanent teacher. Just begging. I'm sorry. I know I was rude. I crossed the line. You're right. And in that moment, there was part of me so much that just wanted to rip that note up, throw it in the trash and say, it's okay. Because I'm a very endearing person. But in that moment, I felt something really important, and I looked at her and I said, I can't do that. Because you have to learn something very important. And that is, there are consequences for our actions. Now, several months have passed, and I don't know where she is, what she's doing, but she's in the middle of summer and getting ready to go back to school. And maybe whatever she was so worried about in terms of punishment or whatever may have come down the pipe. I hope that she realizes there are consequences to actions. And maybe if I can learn that lesson now over a little thing, then it'd be so much better than later on with something really big. You see, Esau missed it by
that much.
He was so close. But just like Saul last week, what we find is it wasn't really a momentary impulse. It wasn't just something that on the spur of the moment he made a choice, but rather it was the result of years of poor decision making. The rejection of his birthright was directly connected to being cut off from his deathbed blessing. And then the second thing, the concept of reinstatement. The concept of reinstatement. You know, Peter was, Mary, do you have that second point? Could you put that up there? I want to just see that for a moment. The one that has both of them. Maybe you do not. You don't? Okay. I'm going to fire my typist. Oh, wait, that would be me. Okay. I guess I'm fired. So, in the first place, we're talking about consequences. But in the second place, the concept of reinstatement. And this is so important. Do you know Peter was reinstated even after he denied Jesus 3 times? Think about that. He denied that he even knew him 3 times. I mean, not little denial, but just calling down curses upon himself. I don't know that guy. I'm not affiliated with him. I don't know him. And then he was reinstated after Jesus rose from the dead. You remember the story. Do you love me, Peter? Yes, I love you. You know I love you. Feed my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? 3 times he asks him. 3 times Peter rejected him, and 3 times Jesus reinstates him. And can't you just hear poor Esau crying on the chest of his dying father? Haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Haven't you reserved any blessing for me? If you think about it, what he's really saying, come on, Dad, you were planning to bless me anyways. Were you just going to give nothing to Jacob? Jacob stole my blessing, but what about him? What can I have what he would have had? And listen to his other words. Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. You and I could pray that. Lord, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. And then Esau wept aloud. And I really think that the way Peter is described weeping in the New Testament, you can picture Esau weeping that same way in the Old Testament. He's weeping because he's realizing the consequences of what he's done. Now, last week I told you that Samuel was like God and Saul was like Adam and Eve. And today I'm telling you that Isaac is like God and Esau is like you and me. You see, the Father did have one more blessing to give. It didn't feel like a blessing, but it was actually a blessing. Sometimes blessings come in disguise. Listen to the blessing that Isaac, as he's dying, he speaks this over his son Esau. His father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But, when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. It is a judgment, but it's not obliteration. Some people think Jacob was blessed and Esau was wiped out. It's not obliteration. It's sort of like Adam and Eve. And we can relate to that. They have to leave the Garden of Eden now. Sin has entered the world. And now it means that you're going to work by the sweat of your brow. Now it means that in childbirth, ladies, you're going to experience pain. Same way here, God is saying to Esau, you're going to have to defend yourself and live by war, have a sword. You will have to serve your brother, but when you grow restless, you'll throw his yoke from off your neck. There will come a time when, because you've worked so hard, you'll feel that yoke of oppression break and come off of your neck. There is a really tricky verse in Romans 9:13. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. It's one of those verses in the Bible that a lot of people like to glance over real quick and just move on and not deal with it. In fact, there is a whole huge crowd that uses this idea for saying this is the proof that God predetermines who will serve him. Now I want to give you a different approach to Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated. If you want to read more about it, I've written about it in my book, a devotional book, but I've written extensively about Jacob and Esau. And I haven't found many authors who mention this. I've found a few who seem to agree with it. Bill Pratt does. Norman Geisler seems to indicate it when he speaks of the fact that Romans chapter 9 is pronouncing judgment upon national Israel and national Esau, not the individuals that they represent. Let me just, for a moment, hit just a couple of highlights that are important to understand this verse. This verse is a quote of Malachi chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Malachi was written at least 600 years after Jacob and Esau had already died. At least 600, some say maybe even as much as 1,000 years later. We don't read anywhere about God hating Esau during Esau's lifetime. We only read that Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. Rebekah had difficulty in her pregnancy. Do you remember the story? She's carrying Jacob and Esau in her womb. And she's having great difficulty, and she cries out, "Why is this happening to me?" And she was told, "There are 2 nations in your womb." 2 nations. Jeremiah, in his prophecy, he writes what is called the catalog of the nations. It's not about individuals. It's a catalog of judgment of 10 different nations. And in Jeremiah 49, he uses language about Esau that, get this, is identical to the language that the prophet Obadiah used about Esau. They almost could mirror side by side. The wording is so very close. So what's interesting is that Obadiah, in his judgment against the nation Edom, which is Esau became Edom, and Malachi at the end of the Old Testament, along with Jeremiah, all of them speak of Esau as a nation. So it's just interesting that the people of Edom, descended from Esau, vanished and just disappeared really from the face of the earth. It's very interesting when you study it out. In the year AD 70, Titus came into Jerusalem and he just razed the city to the ground and just, wiped it out. And there was great persecution. And during that time, during that same stretch of time, you can read that the people of Edom, who were perched high up in the mountains and they felt so secure and so safe, they were threatened by Titus and they abandoned their fortress and they blended in with the Jewish people. And as far as a historical trace, Edom, the nation, goes away. Just like Obadiah prophesies about. But here's the thing. If God hated Esau, the person, I want to suggest to you that he did a much better job of hating other people. For instance, Sisera, the enemy general, ended up with a tent peg in his temple. That's got to be pretty uncomfortable. And the sons of Korah, do you remember this story? The earth opened up and swallowed them alive. What a way to go. I don't know if that was like a sinkhole like they have down in Florida, but it just opened up and swallowed them alive. And then, what about the prophets of Baal? Sword to the throat. See, if God hated Esau, well, he sure could have done a much better job of hating Esau. In fact, when Esau meets with Jacob after a 20-year hiatus and they haven't seen each other for 20 years, Jacob is scared to death that Esau wants to take his life, and he's trying to give gifts to Esau, and eventually he forces them upon him. But Esau's words stand out to me. "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Here's the deal. God had a right to hate every sinner on this earth. You and me included. If we got what we deserve,
That's right.
but He is merciful. And He is kind. And if He really hated us, God could have done a much better job of hating us. Didn't you eat some food this morning? Did you get out of a bed? Did you get to take a shower? You are the upper echelon of the people of planet Earth. People in third world countries would look at you and say, "You're a king, you're a queen."
It's true.
We're so blessed. But you just might think to yourself, "I just can't seem to catch a break. I can't seem to get ahead. I pursue the American dream. It's always just right out there in front of me. But just as soon as I think I'm going to get ahead, then something happens and wham, I get knocked back down again." And maybe you could even relate and say, "I'm just not Jacob. I'm Esau. Poor old Esau. God had it in for Esau. Poor old Esau never had a chance. Well, Esau had his own choices, and his own people developed into a nation, and God's judgment came against that nation. But when Paul says this verse in Romans chapter 9, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. It's a quote from a prophet 1,000 years after they died. And in the very next chapter, Paul says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And so do not let this verse empty you of the responsibility of making a godly decision to follow the Lord. So this morning we've talked about two things really. Consequences. Consequences are important. We find out that we really have to. He would have to apologize to others if He didn't hold us accountable for our consequences for the choices we made. But thankfully, and here's the good news, there's this thing called reinstatement. There's this thing called grace, where God does not give us what we deserve, but He pours out upon us. He lavishes His love upon us, and He wants for us to know Him in an intimate way. Now, each week we're ending with this inch indicator. Today I'm calling it my personal trajectory tracker. In other words, if your life followed the trajectory for what you've done so far, where will it end up? If I keep doing what I've been doing, following the trajectory that I've set for my life, at the end of my life, will I be, and there's 5 different things listed there. Will I be very disappointed? Hopefully not. Will I be very average? Could be. Will I not quite meet my goals? Or maybe a little better than that. Maybe you would circle, I will accomplish some of my goals. Or maybe you would even say, I'm going to exceed my expectations. I don't know where you are in the journey. But here's the old truth, and it really is true. If I keep doing what I've always done, then I'm going to get what I always got. And so at some point, we've got to really ask ourselves, do I succeed or do I settle? And I want to end by using what is called the GROW model. It's not unique to me. Someone else taught me this, but I think it's really, really good. The GROW model. G-R-O-W, GROW. G stands for goals. What goals do I have? I want you to stop and ask yourself that question right now. What are the goals of my life? R is reality. What's the reality? Yeah, maybe I've got these goals. They're high, they're lofty. Is that real? Is it doable? I'm going to retire by age 45, independently wealthy. But the reality is, got a mortgage, 2 cars, and kids in college, and right? O, opportunity. What opportunities are facing me right now? Maybe there's some challenging things in your life, but it could be that God's using that as an opportunity for you. Maybe it seems like in some ways that there's just like things have been laid out for you on a silver platter and you're amazed, like, God, are you really, I can't believe you, God, you're so good to me. You've opened up these opportunities. What are those opportunities? Now, I want to just suggest this. We're responsible for our opportunities that we're given. Amen. And if God opens doors, then someday He's going to expect for us to give an accounting of how we've used those opportunities. And then W is I felt very Texan when I said that, W. W. W is will. What will I do? faced with the challenges, faced with the opportunities, what will I determine to do? It's an act of my will. Goals, reality, opportunities, and will. As I was thinking about this, it occurs to me that any plant that grows has different stages. Have you ever just stopped and thought about the fact that when a seed is planted in the soil, the first thing that happens for the growth is that seed just gets crushed. Just broken. There's great power in a seed. There's great potential. An acorn could become an oak tree, but first it must be planted deep in the soil and just crushed. Another part of the growing or the journey is what I call anticipation. You know that the seed has been planted, it's in the soil, it's being watered, you know it's the right soil conditions, you know that it's getting sunshine, and you're just looking out there every day to see, is it going to break through the soil? And it doesn't matter if you've got one plant or 100 acres, when you're looking and you see that first bud spring through the earth, and there's something so exciting about that, but there's also something exciting about anticipating and waiting and longing. And then, once it does actually break through, there's that phase where it's a tender root. And it needs tender care. And those days you're watching carefully to make sure that it does have everything it needs to thrive. And then there's, to me, in some cases, a fourth stage of fruitfulness, where that plant, not only is it green, and not only does it have foliage, and not only does it look beautiful and healthy, but it actually is reproducing, and fruit is tangible by that plant. Now, if you could take that picture, I'd like you to apply that to your heart today. Where are you in this journey? Would you say you're crushed? I know what that feels like. And I'll tell you, there's not a person in this room that doesn't know what that feels like. To have been absolutely just crushed. Is there anticipation? Are you looking in faith? Lord, when's it going to grow? When's it going to grow? I keep watering. I keep giving the sunshine. I keep praying, I keep believing. You put this desire in my heart. It doesn't go away. It stays. But I don't see any indication at all. Did I not hear correctly? Did I do something wrong? Is it ever going to grow? You're in the anticipation stage. If you could just know what God has around the corner, if you could just get a glimpse of it. Or maybe you're in a tender root stage. Or maybe you're in a fruitfulness stage. And I want you to assess your life this morning, and whatever stage that is, fully surrender that to the Lord. Fully give that back over to Him. I want to ask our worship team to come back, if you would. And this morning I thought about getting a prayer team together, and then at one point I felt like that was not a direction I wanted to go. But now in this moment, just at the leading of the Holy Spirit, I really do think, I wish I had assembled a team of prayer partners. I did not do that. I'm simply going to ask, we've been blessed so much. Several of the people of our church family really love and enjoy praying and praying with others. And especially if you're one of the people that has definitely, if you've been part of prayer ministry in the church, would you help me? I want to just ask that as we are as we're drawing near the end, if you want someone to pray with you, especially if you're going through some crushing right now, you just need someone to be there with you, to pray with you. I'm going to ask you to respond. And so I would like to do this. This is on a whim. But did you know it's okay to be on a whim led by the Spirit of God? Are you okay with this? If God is just drawing you and calling you to be available to pray with individuals this morning, would you mind? I would love to have maybe 6, 7, 8 people, 8 individuals, just to come down to the front and just to face that direction and make yourself available if someone would like to come for prayer. Would you? I'm just asking those of you that God's putting it on your heart, would you do that right now, even right now? Just step out from where you are and come on down to the front.